Rhizosorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, Rhizosorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, October 14th, and I am your host for the day, Lyndsey Smith. Yes, our regular Agronomic Monday. Of course, yesterday was Thanksgiving for us Canadians, and so Sean had a special episode of the show with Dorage and Jared Boschman. Fascinating conversation. If you missed that, you can go check it out at realagriculture.com/radio. Did you know you can go back and listen to any episode you would like? You can also download the podcast and listen to it on your own time offline if you would like. So go and do that. But today we're not going to have an Agronomic Tuesday, which sometimes we do when we miss Agronomic Monday. But don't worry, there's kind of a mix here. We've got some policy chat. We've got definitely some agronomy stuff. And we've got some hybrid selection. We got all sorts of stuff. So on today's show, you will hear from my colleague Amber Bell and Leigh-Ann Harder with BASF talking about the all-important decision of hybrid selection for your canola fields. And, of course, how all sorts of different questions and concerns and things you're trying to manage, how that all sort of works into that hybrid decision. I know for many, you've got sort of your favorites. Canola, of course, those varieties evolve a little faster or change on the farm a little faster than, say, some of our cereal lines. But depending on the disease risk you've got, depending on the soil selection or the field selection that you're dealing with, you may be able to sort of stack the deck in your favor based on what variety you choose. So great conversation. We'll head to that right after the break. Also on today's show, though, you are going to hear from Bryan Gilvesy. It's my conversation captured at the Cappy Exchange event that happened October 1st and 2nd here in Ottawa. We talk about ALUS, but more than just the program. We talk about conservation as a concept, as sort of, well, let's face it, sometimes the word sustainability or conservation is kind of seen as almost instead of farming potentially, or puts farming sort of at odds with something like conservation. And Bryan is one of those, and I myself am as well. I'll show my bias, but I don't think they're either ors. I think it can be both. And Bryan feels very strongly about farmers actually sort of taking back the conversation on conservation and being an active participant in such a thing. And so great chat. Stick around for that later. We've also got a discussion with Erin Barton from FMC and Sean Haney talking about biologicals and talking about how biologicals may fit, specifically in this interview on the pulse acre. But of course, biologicals are a really fascinating aspect of crop production right now. It's been many years in the making. Biologicals aren't necessarily brand new, but certainly we have seen in the last 5 to 10 years a huge amount of money in research and development of biological products and where they fit in a system. Right now, definitely, I think they're a complement to many of the decisions that farmers are making, a lot of the products that farmers are choosing. But there are fits, and there are better fits and maybe less good, let's say, or less consistent results for others. And so they unpack where biologicals fit on the pulse acre. Also part of today's show, and you might be a little sick of me by the end of it, but I did something a bit different. I did write an opinion column, an op-ed as we call it, last week. And how I actually went about it was I actually did a monologue like I'm doing now for the radio show. I do them more often. For those of you who caught last week's show of Sean just monologuing everything, that's right. We talk to our computers a lot on this team. Anyway, I decided to yes, to write the editorial, but I also recorded sort of my thoughts. And so I've included that here. So if you're not someone who visits RealAgriculture.com very often, or maybe you'd like listening versus reading, I've got some thoughts on communication as a key driver of productivity in this country, especially for agriculture and agri-food. And it's probably it's one of the points anyway, where I feel like we're falling flat. So listen for that in, I believe it's our third segment. Now, I do want to touch on, before we hop to a break, I do want to cover just a few news articles, news pieces that we are following that are important, I think. And so I want to touch on those just before we go to a break. First off, we did get, over the weekend, we did get news on an extension of the period to talk about the consultation for dicamba. So dicamba is up for a review. So PMRA, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, does have a proposal out that would restrict the use of dicamba in certain aspects, including over the top, so that's OTT applications. There are several different proposed changes to the dicamba label. So Health Canada, which of course houses PMRA, they've extended until December, they've extended the consultation period. So it was supposed to wrap up November 1, but that has now been extended another 45 days to December 16th. So if you would like to read the proposal, if you have thoughts on the proposal, if you would like to weigh in, you still have an opportunity to do so. Now, one of the other pieces of news we got over the weekend, if you're following along in political circles, you may have already heard, but certainly for those in the pulse industry, probably good news. We're working on it. However, our Minister of Foreign Affairs, Anita Anand, actually met with India's Minister of External Affairs and did release a joint statement. So this was an official visit from October 12th to 14th in New Delhi. And so those in the pulse industry do not need to be reminded that the diplomatic relationship with India has been fraught with strain and issues for the past several years. And it has, of course, potentially had impacts on our pulse exports to the country. And so it does seem, at least at the surface, that we are having some warming of diplomatic relations between Canada and India. Now, I will be speaking with later today. I'll be speaking with Pulse Canada and getting a sense of where this relationship is at, where the tariffs and trade is at. And maybe you're sick of hearing about tariffs, but India is actually one country that we're very used to as Canadians, tariffs being put on, tariffs taken off, tariffs, being extended, maybe shortened up. So that is sort of the norm with dealing with India. But of course, it has been very strained politically. And so we are potentially seeing that warming of relations between our two countries. We'll see where that all lands. And you may actually, on tomorrow's show, maybe have a clip of that conversation as well. One other note before we hop to a break here, we did get the latest AEM numbers. And so these are a measurement of new equipment sales comparing Canada and the US. We get numbers for both. What's interesting here is that we tend to look at equipment sales as sort of a proxy for how the farm economy is doing. Canada has been showing more strength than the U.S., at least in this measurement, I guess, of how the farm economy is going. But those numbers are starting to pull back. So head on over, realagriculture.com, go take a look. All right, we're going to take a quick break. A reminder, though, if you've got any feedback, text us at 1-855-776-6147. That's right. I said text. You don't have to call. You can just text. Okay, let's take a quick break, and I'll be back with more RealAg Radio right after this.
Time for a product spotlight, joined right now by Mark Alberts, who's the Senior Brand Manager for Invigor. Walk us through this Invigor Book and Buy.
Really that opportunity for farmers and retailers that are looking to plan ahead, make their decisions for next year, and getting rewarded for doing so by November 14th, 2025.
Which Invigor hybrids are eligible?
Eligible Invigor hybrids are going to vary by province. Growers, keep in mind where you're located and please search out invigorbookandbuy.ca for which Invigor hybrids are going to be right for you. So number one, growers, visit Invigor vigorbookandbuy.ca and figure out which eligible hybrids in the lineup are going to fit. Number 2, visit your retail by November 14th, 2025 and book your intentions. Number 3, go back to that same retail and purchase your Invigor hybrids in 2026 when you're ready to go, and you'll be eligible for a $30 per bag rebate that would get paid back to you in the fall of 2026. Just a quick plug for invigorresults.ca. If you're looking for some of those local proof points closest to your farm of which hybrids in the Invigor lineup might have a good fit.
Anniversaries are a time of reflection, celebration, and connection. 10 years ago, G3 set out with a vision to build something better for Canadian grain farmers. And you joined us on that journey to launch a new national network. Thank you for the relationships that made it possible. A decade of growth, a decade of connections, and more in decades to come. Connect with your farm business representative or find your closest elevator at g3smarter.ca.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for this Tuesday, October 14th show, Lyndsey Smith. Super glad that you joined us here. And thanks to all of those who download the podcast. We really do appreciate it. If you're on your favorite podcast app, drop us a follow, a like, a comment, all those sorts of good things, and spread the word that Real Agriculture is, of course, on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. Okay, we go now to, well, it's probably top of mind for many of you, especially if canola harvest has wrapped up. And as we heard last week with Brian Voth on Wednesday's show talking about, will China start buying more canola? We did have some news over the weekend about the potential of EV tariffs being lifted. More on that to come, obviously. But it does beg the question, what will the acres be? Yes. But more importantly, when we drill down to the production figures, it's what hybrids, what varieties are you going to choose for those canola acres? And for that, we go to this Canola School episode. You're going to hear from Amber Bell and Leigh-Ann Harder of BASF.
I'm Amber Bell, and this is Real Agriculture. For today's episode of Canola School, I'm getting the chance to catch up with Leigh-Ann Harder of BASF, your technical services specialist, and we're going to be talking about different varieties, which is kind of your specialty.
It is.
You have a background of breeding.
I do, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at canola, there are a lot of different options to choose from. Now, walk me through some of those options, like especially when you go into the specialty traits. What are we looking at?
Yeah, for sure. So I think that, when a grower is choosing to grow canola, their goal is, a good yield baseline. There's so many things that go into allowing that hybrid to recognize its yield potential. So it's things like disease package, whether or not it's, carrying rated R for blackleg, whether or not you're in regions where clubroot is the problem, especially first and second gen, as well as, even things like maturity, things like pod shatter, pod drop, all those things that essentially allow you to make a decision for your operation that allows you to recognize the most yield potential and fit to your environment and to your area and concerns that you have on your farm.
What would be some of those baseline? I mean, you mentioned quite a few diseases there. Mm-hmm. What would be some of those baselines to start even going into that conversation? I mean, would you be looking at past history of the field? How would you decide that?
Yeah, so I think history of your field. I also think kind of what growing region you're in, what maturities fit and work for you. I think at this point, many growers who've grown canola, they've grown it for a long time. They really know, what maturities work for their range, what diseases they have present in their fields. So really, I think that when it comes to making a hybrid, I think the first decision is going to be how does it fit onto my land. So things like if you're using irrigation and all those, they make a decision on, what your standability rating should be and where your maturity is at. So I think when you're ultimately looking at it baseline, your region and your zone is probably going to play a small role, if not one of the biggest. If you're in northern areas, you might be more hesitant to reach for a really late hybrid, when your frost is not uncommon that first week of September and you're seeding later in the year, in May. So I think those kinds of decisions will all play a role in it.
And how big would you say is that variability in the different seeds? So let's say we're talking about harvest time.
Yeah.
What is the stretch? Like how different are the different varieties?
Yeah, so I think that maturity is a really fun one in that it's really influenced from environment. I've looked at varieties the same varieties in multiple different fields where the spread might be 6 days and then you get a week of 35 degrees relentlessly and it's 4 days. So your canola will respond to its environment really handedly and will, it will move through those growth stages depending on what that environment is like. I've worked with InVigor for is most of my experience, but, in some of the trials that I've looked at this year, I'm looking at, a 2 to 6 day spread from really early to some of our really late material. Again, I've seen it in another field where it's 4 days. So it just depends again on that environment and what's playing a role in it, what your stand is, if it's lodged, or if you do have disease pressures, will kind of change how all that looks.
When talking about disease selection and disease-resistant traits, how much disease is too much to the point where you might want to be selecting for that disease? Yeah,
I think that diseases, they, again, so influenced from their environment and conditions that you got. So if you got hail early season, opening that wound on that plant really does bring in that opportunity for disease, even if you haven't had huge prevalence of it before. This is like where rotation comes into it too. If you're growing the same crop or crops that have the same host every single year, it can kind of increase that incidence of it. When you're choosing to grow, a hybrid, if you do have, blackleg might be your concern, and all hybrids are resistant to blackleg in some form, but maybe it's time to switch it up. If you've grown one hybrid exclusively for the last 5 years and you're on a 2-year, even a 3-year rotation, it's probably wise to consider bringing in something different. A lot of the breeding teams across all the different organizations are truthfully breeding so that their newer materials coming out with different packages and stuff like that. So we've seen it, over the entirety of canola's lifespan of growing one hybrid exclusively over multiple years. This just causes a natural breakdown of that resistance. So switching up your hybrids, switching up your maturities and all those things will just allow you to not build that pressure from year over year.
So to be clear there, we talk about rotating crops quite often, right? So you'd actually recommend, on top of rotating crops, also rotating the varieties?
Yeah, for sure. Our recommendation is always to grow multiple different varieties in one, or multiple different hybrids in 1 year, and not to exclusively grow one. We understand that happens, and for sure you have a fan favorite. We all do. But bringing in that different genetic background, bringing in those different things, it really allows you to maintain the longevity of the hybrid maybe that is your fan favorite. So it just allows you to risk mitigate and will prolong the life of that one hybrid.
What would the planning process look like for a grower looking at choosing a variety?
Yeah. So I think, there's probably a few things, it even comes down to like how your harvest management is. Do you straight cut? Do you swath? Do you a combination of both? If you're a grower who chooses to swath, maybe you're not looking at things like pod shatter, or you're not concerned about it. If you're a grower who is exclusively straight cut at this point, you're growing hybrids that are going to allow for you to recognize that maximum yield potential with those harvest aids in there. So, whether it's pod shatter, which is, the breaking of the two valves from the pod, or it's pod drop, so the loss of a whole pod from the plant as it reaches that maturity timeline. I think that those will all go into choosing what you are going to grow, especially when it comes to like that harvest protection side of things.
So as someone with a breeding background, are there any traits, any varieties, anything that you're really excited about coming down the pipeline? Anything that you're allowed to talk about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that a lot of the breeders across Western Canada really recognize that, there's challenges when it comes to growing canola. We know we face different headwinds every year. New things pop up like verticillium, really trying to recognize that yield potential in varying different weather environments that we've been getting over the last several years, and things are changing. So I think that what's really exciting is that, we want to be there for the problems of today. We were there for the problems of yesterday, but more importantly, we want to be there for anything that arises in the future. So I think that, from my side, just being really excited about, working with the traits we already have, expanding them, perfecting them, making them, and continuing to work with them, as well as bringing in new things that really allow growers to recognize their yield potential and make growing canola fun for them.
That's terrific. Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Leigh-Ann.
Yeah, I want to thank you very much too. It's been really fun.
We're going to take a quick break here on RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM, and we'll be back with more right after this.
For the upcoming growing season, take advantage of Rhizazor.
Rhizazor performance has been proven on hundreds of on-farm trials, which you can view at bosssolutions.com. Additionally, growers can take advantage of the Rhizazor Grower Guarantee Program. This program protects growers' revenue up to $40 per acre if their yields don't match their 10-year APH.
Discover the impact. Download the RiseAbsorb Performance Report to see how RiseAbsorb is transforming nutrient efficiency and driving results in the field.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hepner and Lyndsey Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Hello and welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, October 14th, and I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. It's also a good time to book next year's canola. Well, this year's results are fresh, especially when it saves you money. Save up to $75 per bag of canola with DeKalb Harvest Rewards, but only until October 31st. Visit DeKalbRewards.ca for details. Well, if you listened to the Friday's Issues panel, and I hope you did, Megan Murdoch, Kelvin Hepner, Sean Haney, and myself were on the show, broke down sort of the biggest news, stories, issues, things we found and saw on the internets last week. Really great show. Great to have Megan back on. And there was a mention of a column that I wrote about communication and the importance of it in not just creation of policy, obviously, but just generally speaking, for the advancement of agriculture in this country, we need to have more communication across value chains, across supply chains, across even the political boundaries, let's be honest. And so what I did when I wrote that op-ed is I actually did a monologue. And so I'm going to share that here so that those of you who maybe don't visit the website or aren't into reading op-eds, you can listen to the op-ed. So here it is. Here are my thoughts on its communication. Stupid. Last week, I got to attend the Canadian Agri-Food in a Risky World event put on by CAPI, that's the Canadian Agri-Food Policy Institute. I was asked to moderate a panel on whether or not Canadian agri-food, so farming and agriculture, was equipped to handle the risks it's currently facing. We unpacked all the different kinds of risk, at least as an outline. So we talked about policy risk, geopolitical risk, trade risk, climate risk. There are several different layers and kinds of risk on a farm. Some are ones that we want or need some sort of protection from. So there are things like crop insurance or risk management programming. But some risks are, of course, calculated ones. I mean, let's face it, you're never guaranteed a harvest, but we still put the crop in. And the payment is the hope that you've got enough yield and a good enough price to make a little money. That's the risk-reward trade-off. We did talk, though, because it's a policy event and it's in Ottawa. It was beautiful, by the way, at the National Arts Centre. When we talk about whether or not Canadian agriculture is ready to face the risk ahead when it comes to, let's say, policy or some of those risk management programs I just talked about, one of the key things that was brought up by a panelist and was discussed in the room is that agriculture and Canadian agriculture is complex. There are complex and sometimes separated value chains that feed into one another. We have trade-dependent industries. We have domestic industries. There were questions from in the room like, how do we leverage, let's say, small-scale food production? How do we grow it to be medium-scale, large-scale, and maybe even export-ready? One of the profound things that eventually came out of this panel discussion was that at times, maybe more often than we'd like to admit, one aspect of the value chain doesn't even know the other aspect exists, let alone can work together. So thinking back to that comment about small scale food production. And before you sort of roll your eyes and be like, oh, Lenny, like not everybody needs to like make jam in their basement and then eventually sell it around the world. But hold up for a sec, because this example actually sort of proves part of our bigger issue. How does someone who has potentially, so think about it. Let's say you've got, your grandfather's spice rub recipe or your grandmother's flapper pie or something really cool that you're always told, oh my gosh, I wish I could get this in a store or whatever. Would you know how to scale up? Would you know where to go for grant opportunities? Would you know what food regulations you needed to meet to even be able to sell this? These are all things that, yes, if you do enough research, you probably can find answers for. But realistically, if we think about it even larger scale, if we think about perhaps the incoming generation or the upcoming generation of people in agriculture that maybe want to diversify or change a business, do they know where to go for more information? Do they know where to go for potential funding or financing that's maybe outside the realm of your regular bank? Because frankly, we all know where that ends up. And that's, if you don't have equity, they're probably not going to talk to you. Then it translates, of course, to the policy discussion. One of the key things that we talked about at this event was that right now, we're in a moment where the federal government is looking for nation-building projects. We talked about this on the issues panel on Friday, on what would a nation-building project that was agriculture-focused, that was agri-centric, what would that look like? And I'd love your ideas on this one, because I have some ideas, or I have some ideas or components. And Kelvin gave his answer on Friday. Tyler McCann gave his answer on Friday as well. But what would a nation-building agricultural farming, ag and food project look like? Because I think what I'm getting at here is that one of the key components that's missing in our advancement of Canadian agriculture, in our unlocking of potential, is the communications piece. And I know I work in words, and Sean can roll his eyes at me and say, words matter. But to butcher a phrase, it's communication, stupid. And that's a play on, it's the economy, stupid. You might have to Google it or look up where that's from. But realistically, we have several parts of our value chain, and our governments included, and whether that's municipal, provincial, or federal, or whether that's within the departments, within a government, we don't necessarily all talk to each other. We don't always communicate what we need to the other step in the chain, backwards or forwards. And we tend, when we have events or those sorts of things, they tend to be one group of people that attends them. I will say that from the perspective of my role in the world and Real Agriculture's role in agriculture, this is one of the things we try to bridge, whether it's through the radio show and the diverse voices we bring in, or things like our connection with Cappy and being able to talk about policy. But realistically, we need really strong communicators and strong leadership for our producer groups, for our value chains that are willing to sit down at the same table and have an exploratory conversation to say, hey, what do you need? What would be helpful? How can I help in my role get what you need to do done? And I think if we can all work on the communication piece, we may be able to move some of these big pieces forward. And to pat myself on the back, this was my take-home message on Wednesday, and that was before Thursday when Arlene Dickinson closed out the conference on a panel as well. Her key message to agriculture, to everyone in that room, was, what's your ask? And that's communication, stupid. All right, would love your feedback and your thoughts on this topic. 1-855-776-6147. And as Sean pointed out last week for the first time, you can actually text that number. You don't have to leave a voicemail, because if you're like me and allergic to phone calls, maybe you just want to text. So go ahead, you can do that. 1-855-776-6147. Of course, you can always zip me an email, lsmith@realagriculture.com, or follow us across social media. All right, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more right here on RealAg Radio on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mine to Market at blackearth.com.
Peter Johnson at WheatPete, RealAgriculture.com. I'm the host of The Word, and I love doing The Word. I love the questions. I love the challenges. I love having to apply agronomics to all over the globe and areas outside of my normal jurisdiction. Also, I love the feedback the most, where growers challenge me, tell me about their plot results, help me to learn. The Word, absolutely the best part of my day.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, Channel 147, Sirius XM. I am your host for this Tuesday, October 14th, Lyndsey Smith, and the future of Canadian food is strong. And FCC is ready to help the next generation of innovators like you with financing tailored to your needs and resources to help keep you growing. To get started, visit fcc.ca/youngfarmer. We hop now to my full conversation with Bryan Gilvesy. He's the Chief Strategy Officer of ALUS, based in southwestern Ontario. And I caught up with him at the Cappy Exchange event to talk about, what does conservation mean? Is it used as sort of a derogatory term now in agriculture? And I asked him how he thinks farmers can take the term back to be something positive for their own farms and for agriculture as a whole. I'm Lyndsey Smith with Real Agriculture, and joining me now, it's Bryan Gilvesy. He's the Chief Strategic Officer with ALUS. Bryan, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Lyndsey.
All right, now we've had an exciting day here in Ottawa at the Cappy event, talking about policy, and maybe more things outside of the panel that we got to sit on. But today's question that I really want to dig into is looking at the question of what is agriculture, and more importantly, what is farmers' role in conservation?
I looked it up once. I looked up what the definition of conservation was, and it allows three definitions inside there: to protect, or to preserve, or to restore. So there's three things you see going on there. Our role isn't to protect and preserve. There's lots of organizations that do that. They buy land, they put fences around it, they kick the humans off. Ours is to produce more, right? We are the productive side. We're productive people. Now, because we're the productive people, we're in the rarest space of conservation, right? We're solving environmental problems. You don't really solve an environmental problem if you just kick the humans off of land. So I think we're in a unique space in agriculture to be able to claim this agenda as ours.
What does that look like in practice? What are some of for those who maybe aren't aware of ALUS or what ALUS does, what does an ALUS project look like? What does it entail?
Well, technically, ALUS pays you as a farmer to produce ecosystem services. That's a really big fancy word. But what it means is you're going to plant things that at the end of the day maybe make more habitat for biodiversity. They maybe help filter water. They maybe help our communities become more resilient to the big rain events and things like that. They may involve helping our soils build more organic matter and hold more water from a rainfall event. So these are things that benefit people not on our lands or us, but benefit the broader community. They're technically called ecosystem services, but the key to all that is services get paid for, right? There's an emerging marketplace for these things that people of the planet require, and I think that farmers play a unique role, if they choose, to become part of this, what I call an emerging space or emerging marketplace.
Emerging, but you've been working at this a little while. So what components are coming together now that are making this successful, that are making this work for the farmers that are taking part?
So the number one thing is this. We are a principles-based organization at ALUS. And the one thing that we've landed on, and we weren't solid on in the early years around 2007, 8, and 9, and that is that farmers would lead the program inside their own community. We are a very grassroots program, so farmers, you get to be selfish. You get to sit on a committee that decides what are the things that matter to your community, what are your priorities, and you can direct programming into those sorts of things. So it's not all tree planting. If you love grass and you're a native grassland area, we reward people for putting native grasslands or managing native grasslands, for instance. That's the sort of thing that ALUS can pay for. And it also allows our community partnership advisory committees to be extremely creative. There is a lot of flexibility in what programming gets delivered, but again, power goes to your community, your partnership advisory committee, and you get to do the right thing for you and your community, but it has global or national implications. You're making the world a better place to live.
It also, though, makes a difference, as you mentioned, at that local level, at the community level. What are examples of where ALUS or ALUS projects have worked with their, say, municipal governments to work together on some of these?
We've done a lot of work around the relationship with municipalities. A lot of what they're concerned about is this. Rural municipalities have limited budgets. And when these big flash flooding or big rainfall events come and blow out the roads, bridges, and culverts, they can't contain their budgets anymore. So they've seen a way to work with ALUS and ALUS farmers to, on different parts of the landscape, slow the water down a little bit, let it seep more into the topsoil, maybe recreate some wetlands. And they're being a little bit selfish too, right? They want to protect their budgets. This works. It's cost effective. It works within their community. And it draws a real tight relationship between what an urban dweller needs and a rural dweller needs. The second piece of the puzzle is around water. We've proven in several circumstances that we actually help filter municipal water, and they don't need to build as expensive water filtration plants. That's the role of the farmer. It's kind of cool.
Now, let's somewhat more perhaps contentious or controversial perhaps is in farming circles, the term conservationist or environmentalist, maybe stewardship of something, can sometimes have negative connotations, or this idea of, as you said, you know, kicking any sort of agriculture or people off the land and leaving it as it is. Where do you think in the terminology we've sort of gone awry?
Well, I understand your sentiment because before I joined this program, I was the same way, right? I feel, and I've heard this from farmers across the country, we all feel the environment agenda is being pressed down upon us by people that don't understand our economy, don't understand our lives, don't understand how our communities work. That's offensive to a lot of people, right? And then the next level, if you feel that you're getting pressure that you're actually bad for the environment, boy, that's a pretty good way to disengage people that can provide more assistance to the natural environment than anybody else on the planet. Farmers, right? We have land, we have skills, we have energy. I think we're trying to change the conversation that this agenda around conservation began with fishers, hunters, and farmers years ago. It's moved away, but I think it's time to bring it home again. This is a little bit of who we are. We all value our role as stewards of the natural environment in Canada. I think every single farmer does. And I want to rebuild that.
So for those who perhaps maybe wouldn't use a term like a conservationist or environmentalist, how then do we take that conversation back and start to be part of that conversation? Because I think you're bang on that when a conversation becomes combative, it's not a conversation anymore. You get defensive. So for those who, and I think there are a lot of farmers out there that recognize the value of caring for land, of wanting to improve water infiltration. There are so many productive benefits to doing some of these things. So how do we get farmers to sort of get past perhaps some of what has made them defensive and maybe be more open to some of these conversations?
Well, the best word I've ever heard for this business is stewardship, right? We all stand up and say and believe in our role as stewards. What's new to the conversation is this. We believe, if we believe we're stewards, we believe nature has value. We're asking a simple question. If that nature has value, then we should be rewarded for producing more of it, right? It's sort of a simple calculus. The day that carbon marketplaces were invented, farmers were, or anybody on the planet that could sequester carbon was able to get a check for doing it and get a check paid annually, right? That notion is moving in across water marketplaces, biodiversity marketplaces, and indeed, we think it's a valuable role in marketplace that farmers can fill on a voluntary basis if that's what they feel like they want to do. There's no pressure for anybody to go into this unless they're comfortable.
All right, Bryan, we'll leave it there. For those who maybe want more information about ALUS, where can they go?
ALUS.ca, ALUS.ca.
All right. Thank you so much. We're going to leave it there for now. We're going to take a quick break here on RealAg Radio, and I will be back with more right after this.
Built on over 100 years of seed innovation and unwavering commitment to farmers, Pioneer 100 Series canola hybrids deliver a step change in yield performance and agronomic traits. This isn't just better canola. It's different canola. Pioneer 100 Series. Contact your local Pioneer sales representative or visit pioneer.com/100 series to learn more today.
I'm Lyndsey Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to RealAgriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode. Welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio, channel 147, Sirius XM. It is Tuesday, October 14th, and I am your host, Lyndsey Smith. And you know, one of the things I love about Canadian agriculture and real agriculture and the fact that we get to cover agriculture basically coast to coast. I know we probably need to spend more time in the Maritimes and we don't get to BC nearly enough. But it does mean that we cover just such a host of different crops and crop types. And so for this next segment, you're going to hear from Sean Haney with Erin Barton of FMC talking about biologicals and specifically biologicals for the pulse acre.
There's a lot of talk, a lot of excitement, a lot of questions around the whole concept of biologicals, and a lot of the different companies are really putting a lot of money into research and product development. Well, I should say big and small companies. There's a lot of companies that are focused in this right now. It definitely is an area of interest and innovation. Here to talk about it from a pulse perspective is Erin Barton, who is the technical sales manager with biologicals at FMC. Erin, how are we doing?
Great, thank you.
Okay, so like I said, did I describe kind of the amount of excitement around biologicals right now? There's just seems to be a lot of chatter about it.
There is, and it's really become a focus with the science industry right now. Like they've really started to look below ground, just at all the communication that is occurring, all the symbiosis that is happening with all the different microbes down there. Like we're only just getting the tip of the iceberg right now. It's a huge focus below ground.
Yeah. Okay. So when we think about pulse crops, what product categories, I guess, I don't know the best way to describe that, but what product categories fit under the biologicals umbrella, and what do they do?
That's a really good way to describe it, actually. Okay. So there is bionutrition products. So these are any biologicals that are basically helping with the fertility of the plant. So they're either solubilizing phosphorus or fixing nitrogen. So your classic rhizobial inoculants will fall under there. And then there is the biocontrol category. So these are ones that are suppressing something within the plant. So a bioinsecticide, a biofungicide fall under there. These ones are actually regulated through PMRA, the same way a synthetic chemical is regulated. They fall there. And then the other one is biostimulants. So often with a biostimulant, they're stimulating something within the plant. So often it's hormone production and really looking at abiotic stresses. Those kind of products will fall there.
Okay, so we got bionutrition, biostimulants, and biocontrol. Now, because bio is in all of them, does that mean that when we're talking about biologicals, that there is some sort of living organism that is doing something, or am I simplifying that way too much?
Yeah, for the most part, sometimes biostimulants they'll be plant-based, or there'll be like a signaling molecule, which is a molecule. It's not a living thing, but it is helping with communication of the microbes under the soil.
Okay, cool. Okay, so from your vantage point, why do you think the industry is trying to move forward so aggressively with biologicals in this whole category?
There's a couple of reasons. One of them is sustainability. That comes from public policy, consumer demand, and with that, grower demand. There's also return on investment. We're really starting to figure these bugs out more, figure out how to formulate them better, shelf life. And with all that, it's when is the best place to use them? And then with that becomes your return on investment. So you're kind of getting your bang for your buck there as well.
Yeah, and obviously we're especially on the weed side of the equation, I guess, if you look at it that way, there is a lot of focus on weed resistance right now, and we're seeing some older products face some registration challenges, and it's really difficult to bring new products to the market. And so I guess if some biologicals can have success, then that opens up more options. Another tool in the toolbox, I guess, is the best way probably that a lot of people would put that.
That's right. And a lot of them now, like a biocontrol product is marketed to work in conjunction with your synthetic. So you're bringing a new mode of action with your biological. So when you use it with your synthetic, you're helping to keep that synthetic around longer so that you're not building up resistance. So they're working together very well.
Yeah. And, when we look at crops like, say, I don't know, corn and wheat, for example, maybe the use of a biological product might be a little bit newer than if we're thinking about the pulse industry, where we've been using inoculants for a very long time and have seen the benefit from a sustainability standpoint and ROI. It's kind of been the game we've been playing for a long time.
Right. Rhizobial inoculants. I just looked into it, and they've been around from the 1930s. They were commercialized. And then it's taken us like 60 years in order to get like a pea solubilizing bug. Like in the early 90s, we got one of those. And now we've just evolved now to get products that are for like corn and wheat. So things like a pea solubilizer, a phosphate solubilizer, they're just coming to the realm now.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, providing growers have seen the return of the use of inoculants in their pulses.
Right. Like we know the benefits of an N fixation. Like we're not having to use so much nitrogen fertilizer. We're getting that from the symbiotic relationship underground. So crops like fava beans, they can get 88% of their nitrogen needs from the N fixation process, whereas peas and lentils, it's around that 50%. So we're getting a lot of what we need already with these great relationships underground. And so we do see that now with the cereal crops, where we're starting to research and find those bugs then that can have these same kind of relationships and just help that plant have a stronger root system, able to access more of the nutrients then, and the water uptake is greater. So it's come a long ways in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and the research and the science of all of this, I find very fascinating, because we're really kind of
in some ways we're all kind of learning together. Like we aren't to the finish line yet on some of the matches and some of the uses and all that, which I kind of find very, very intriguing. When it comes to the question around annual inoculation, it's not a case of like, hey, I had peas here 3 years ago, I inoculated, now I don't have to. Annual is a really important piece of this, is it not still?
Right. So we want to add a fresh inoculant every year. We are adding bugs that have been researched to be very effective at end fixation. When you add bugs to your soil, they start to mutate in 1 to 3 years. So you no longer have the same bug that you added. It's now mutated in order just to survive. So it may still form nodules, but it won't be as good at fixing nitrogen as that commercial strain that you add year over year. And the plant itself has an expense to end fixation. It has to give nutrients, phosphorus, sugars to this whole process. So if the plant is expending all this energy, you want a bug in there that is going to be able to give you the best end fixation for that cost that plant was giving. So by re-inoculating every year, that's what you're doing. You get the best end fixation that you can. Yeah,
and if you talk to long-time pulse growers, they're in this routine of doing this. They've seen the benefit. At one time there was, especially like pulse crops, wine and soybeans, talk about like double inoculation. Is that something that still gets talked about?
Yeah, for sure it does, especially with the soybeans, because that Bradyrhizobium is not native to our soils. So if they've had years where they've never, especially if they've never inoculated, so they are not going to get any nodules forming if they are not adding an inoculant. And so if you double inoculant, you're getting that many more bugs into that soil in that year. If you've been out of soybeans for quite a few years, you want to then double inoculate as well. And then there's also, if there's been some extreme conditions like drought or too much moisture, these bugs, they die off. So the numbers are way down, and it requires a lot of microbes, a lot of rhizobia in order to make this process happen.
You're spending a lot of time in this category. What excites you about the future in when it comes to biologicals and pulse crops?
Oh, there's quite a bit, because there's so much research happening. Like it's almost like you said at the beginning, like the biologicals are having their moment to shine. So there's so much research behind it, and we're just finding out so many new things with how bugs are communicating, like I said, with the signaling molecule. So adding that after the fact, not just at seeding, we can add them foliar, and just the new bugs and the synergies and what we can do with them.
Yeah.
Right now we don't know what the limit is. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I agree. It is very, very fascinating. Before we wrap up, I wanted to give you an opportunity to mention some of the resources that FMC has when it comes to biologicals and pulse crops.
So we do have a FMC Canada YouTube channel, and on there we have a number of webinars that we've done that you can go and look at, and just to see like what strain selection means and just what the benefits and some yield results. You can get all that kind of stuff on that YouTube channel.
Yeah, great stuff. Well, Erin, thanks a lot for joining us here today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Well, that does it for another episode of RealAg Radio. Thank you so much for making us part of your day. If you've got any turkey leftovers, please send them my way. I also accept cranberry sauce and stuffing. If you've got any feedback on today's show, drop us a line at lsmith@realagriculture.com, or, as I said, you can text our RealAg feedback line, 1-855-776-6147. As always, find us across social media at Real Agriculture. Give us a follow, a like, all those sorts of good things, so you never miss anything from your team here at Real Agriculture. All right, have a wonderful Tuesday. We'll talk to you again. Cheers, everybody.